Hello, students. So today we are talking, um, or I'm presenting our last Panopto video of the semester. Yay! It's a topic that many of your groups came up and talked little pieces about as we were doing our Mr. Megabucks presentations. So I think it's going to dovetail nicely and give a real sense of cohesion to the semester. I wanted to present this 10 things to improve your collection and the magic of merchandising uh, to sort of close off our semester. The presentation today will be grouped into three separate areas: selection, organization, and promotion. These are the areas that most merchandising and marketing of our collections will fall within. To start with, of course, selection and making those right decisions. Many of you, again, in your Megabucks presentations, saw the magic of selecting and getting new materials and getting popular materials in your collection at the right time. So my very first tip to you in this presentation is select to meet demand. Select for demand. I know that we had a discussion earlier in the semester about giving them what they want versus giving them quality. Uh, Quite a few of you uh, were quite vocal in supporting one side or the other. And in my world, and I'm again talking about the public library world in general, I believe the best philosophy to adopt and to take in to your collection management duties is to give the customer what they want. I think that there are more opportunities for success in that with that philosophy than there are for failure. So you'll have one leg above the competition when you, as a collection developer, select to meet demand. And what do our customers want? Well, I think many of you came across some really good research as you were doing your presentations. But in general, and as you know probably from reading the ALA Perceptions of Libraries report on the Canvas class webpage, it seems customers want popular collections of books, popular collections of DVDs, popular collections of music. Uh, First and foremost, they believe that materials in the library should benefit the youth. They expect and they even want and desire an exciting bookstore feel. They want to be able to be comfortable in the library, whether that means with having lights and comfortable seating, or even just having a cup of coffee with them. There's benefit for giving our customers the comfort of being at home while in the library. And finally, customers believe that we don't have enough copies of the popular books. Um, we should probably select several copies of very, very popular materials. Buying one copy of, say, Harry Potter um, wouldn't have met the demand of the community, and customers would have probably had to wait a couple of years if there was a waiting list. So waiting weeks and waiting for months to get a new popular item just isn't acceptable to the customer. They don't understand why we can't meet demand. My second tip to you is to pay attention to youth. You cannot select demand unless you know what that demand is. And all the statistics that I've seen and that you probably came across as well seem to show that demand in public libraries revolves around children and youth. So definitely think youth as you go out into the library world. Circulation of children's materials, by the way, in the US increased 44% from the 10-year period of 1994 to 2004. It went up again another 30% in the decade after that. When asked who libraries were for, a vast majority of people would say that they believe libraries are for children. Even people who do not have children say this. So, in any case, know that selecting for youth is a big priority in the public library world. And in any case, know your community's priorities as you go out into the library collecting field. So know your community, know your collection, know everything about the collection. What are your collection's strengths? What are your collection's weaknesses? What are your goals of your collection? When was the last time you even weeded? If I gave you a pop quiz right now, name the top 10 collecting collections in your library, what would you say? You should be able to pull that out really quickly as a collection developer. What are the top circulating collections in your library? What is your entire collection budget? You should know that right off the top of the bat. What collection gets the largest piece of the collection budget? Having answers to these right off the top of your head will let you know what the collection's priorities are and give you knowledge about the collection that a collection developer needs. The fourth tip I want to give you is to make a splash. And you can do that in many ways, of course, and we'll talk about several others as we go through this presentation. But to make a splash, I believe you should buy multiple copies of popular items rather than different titles. For example, let's say that you're in your collection duties, you found out that there was a need for books on Hawaii. So you did some research and you found 10 titles of books on Hawaii, and you went out and you bought one copy of each of those 10 titles. Well, one person comes in the next day who needs books on Hawaii, and they see all these incredibly great titles on Hawaii, and they take each one of them home. So you met the needs of that one person quite nicely. However, what about the subsequent people who come in for books on Hawaii? If, however, you found one or two titles as you were doing your research on Hawaii that were exceptional, and maybe you bought 5 copies of each of those great titles, 2 titles that you like the most, then 5 different people who came in would see these 2 exceptional titles. So think about bulk rather than variety when you're trying to make a splash and meet the needs of your customers. I think I mentioned this a couple of times to several of you in your selection exercise. So that's what I was getting at. So moving from selection to now organization, customers expect us to buy collections and present them in ways that are logical to them, not to us. Our customers utilize many of our competitors, and they bring a savvy and they bring a sophistication to their library experience. However, we have a long way to go in delivering services to ensure that our customers see us as essential. And one way that we confuse them and confound them is by the way that we organize our collection. Our collections tend to confuse the browser. Read this little quote. It's true. We tend to organize the collection around the librarian's needs rather than our collection's community's needs. Experts in customer behavior claim that people entering a store drift towards the right. And for this reason, a store's prime display area is 5 to 20 feet or 5 to 20 steps inside the store to the right of the front door. And customers are then expected to move through the stores counterclockwise to check out to the checkout counter when they're ready, which is usually on the left side of the door in our retail establishments. Now, Barnes and Noble, for instance, they follow this pattern of display area on the right and checkout counters on the left. of the front doors. And Barnes and Nobles then places bestsellers right inside the front door, and up a power aisle you'll see displays of popular items right down there. The feature and the focus in those stores is on the material. If you think about libraries and the first thing that you see when you enter the front door of a library, I would venture to guess that the first thing a customer sees when they enter a public library would be a staff member sitting at a desk with the collection of the books placed around, placed around the perimeter of the building, out of sight, out of mind. Though we often praise libraries for having a lot of open space, people come to our libraries looking for books. So having the books first and foremost in front of them will satisfy that need. Moving on then. Organization again. If you ask me, how do I get to Los Angeles? And I told you, well, 34 degrees north, 118 degrees west. What would you say? You'd probably laugh and you'd say, yeah, right. Well, where are the books? Well, but even if I told you, well, one of those numbers is the latitude and one of those is the longitude, and you could easily use this formula that I'm giving you. Latitude phi and longitude theta are related to rectangular coordinates, and it's very easy. Just figure it out this way. And at that point, you as a customer would probably walk away from me thinking that I was out of my mind, and then you go buy a map. Now, as absurd and as silly as that example might seem, when customers see our Dewey and our Library of Congress classification numbers, they are faced with the same sort of confusion. What do these coordinates mean? I don't understand. We're just not speaking their language. So my fifth tip to you is to organize your library with the customer in mind, not with the librarian in mind. Utilizing a bookstore or even a grocery store labeling system, as you see here on the whiteboard, with major categories, looking to meet the needs of the 80% of the customers who are coming in for those top 10 items, and featuring them rather than the Dewey number. Yes, have the Dewey number ready and available, but not the main focus, because our users seem to not understand that. Here's an example of a library that uses this main topic areas. This is from somewhere up in Canada, right up in near Vancouver, called the Ironwood Library, and they have these power walls with signage. They merchandise their main items. What you're seeing on the whiteboard there is the main entrance. You as a viewer of this slide would be standing right at the main entrance to the library, and this particular library found the top 20 circulating collections in their library. They made signs that spoke to their language, not, instead of saying cookery as an LC subject heading, they would say cookbooks. And they made signs and they put them above those collections that were pulled out of the Dewey numbers that were in the library proper, but put them front and center for the browser. So consider the browser. The Metropolitan Library Services Urban Library Council say that 74% of library users fall into the category of browser. They're just looking for something good to read. And this is something that I probably have brought up a couple of times in this semester. Our libraries are set up for an individual to find one item, usually the librarian, because they know how to use the Dewey number. But if I am a user and I'm looking for just something good to read, having my library organized to find one item with a specific coordinate doesn't meet my needs as a browser. What I'm showing you here on the whiteboard is an example from a library that I was director at, that we were having trouble with our magazines. What you see there are the way our magazines were set up. We had the most current copy in a plastic folder face out on these slanted shelves. Now, back issues that could be checked out were beneath those slanted shelves. The user just had to lift the slanted shelf and see back issues. Unfortunately, when you lifted those shelves, the other face out issues on the slanted shelves would usually fall off, or some people didn't quite understand or figure out that the shelves could be lifted, that they were on some sort of a pulley that you could lift it up. So we just thought we could do better. So I thought about this with a bookstore, a friend of mine who works at a bookstore, and I asked them how they did their magazines. They said we have them on a browsing wall. So I said, oh, well, I came and looked at it, and I saw exactly what he meant. And I took this, and I had our facilities crew take down these bookshelves that you see, and instead on the wall behind the bookshelves, we had slat wall put on and put acrylic holders that look like this. So that's exactly the same wall. They just had so you can see the difference. We just had slat wall nailed against that wall. Put these acrylic holders that have a little lip that fit into these slats that are on the wall, and put all of our magazine issues out there, even the back issues. And yes, we allowed our current issue to be checked out. We even installed those nice little reading chairs there so that people could come to the library and read. And then if they didn't quite want to put their magazines back in the acrylic holders, they could slip them in those baskets, and we would have staff members or volunteers put them back in their appropriate place on the slat wall. Now, one of the other things that you can see is that over on the far left of this photo, now I don't have access to a pointer, so I can't show you. Over on the far left is actually where you would enter this library. And those shelves are perpendicular to the wall, and they block the view of the person who came in. You could not see where to go in the library. So when we went to this, the person who came in the library, it immediately opened up that whole space so people who could come in could see exactly where they wanted to go. So set up the library to help the browser succeed, not to make the librarian look smart. And what does the browser expect? Well, they want their material set up and organized in such a way that it's easy to browse. They would love our libraries to be open all the time, but since we can't be open all the time, they would want us to be convenient to them and quick and easy, and having multiple copies, as I said. They don't want to have to ask. It makes them feel stupid to have to ask where something is. They value our reading knowledge, and they want to ask us what good book could we recommend, not where do I find this particular Dewey number. So for example, I also want to recommend or encourage you all. I might have mentioned it in several of your Megabucks presentations, a book called Why We Buy, and there's another one, The Call of the Mall, and they are both by an author called Paco Underhill, Underhill. They were both on the New York Times bestseller list. And Paco Underhill writes amazingly about customer and user behavior in buildings. He owns a very large think tank and consulting firm, well known and used by Nordstrom's and huge conglomerates of corporations that utilize their knowledge. And he knows what browsers want. So I'd recommend that you watch that or read that. I'm sorry. Browsing for all ages is something that I would encourage you to strive towards. It's not as easy as it sounds, but what you see on the whiteboard there is a customer who wanted to look at books about parenting. She had her two little children with her. They were pictured there behind her. In the regular library, parenting, of course, is over in the adult nonfiction. So mom would have to cart her two little kids over to the nonfiction area, usually dingy and crowded and spying out. And the last place those kids wanted to be. They were bored and they just entered a library. They're visually enthralled, and mom had to drag them over to the nonfiction where they were not happy. So we decided to take out the parenting books and bring them over to the children's room and put them on the end caps of the children's nonfiction right near where they would be in the children's area. So mom then brought her two kids over to the children's area. The kids could browse for things that they wanted. She could then keep her eyes on them while she was looking at books on parenting. Organized around genres, just to mention some research that was done by William A. Borden, Borden. Borden pulled, this was done in 1907, he pulled books from the fiction shelves to set up special shelving for historical novels and detective novels. And during a 2-year period of observation, Borden noticed patrons who previously had only browsed the new books had begun selecting books from the genre shelves that he had set up. He also noted that readers also began picking lesser-known authors from their chosen genre. Another area of research by Sharon Baker, Baker, she did some experiments in 1980, and she found that circulation of genre fiction increased with the size of the library. In other words, the larger the library was, the more genre fiction circulated in relation to the size of that collection. In other words, genre fiction in a small library of, say, 2,500 volumes circulated genre fiction by only 39%. However, when the large library measured this same genre fiction, they had 15,000 volumes. Circulation of genre fiction increased by 349%. So clearly, when faced with the huge amount of material that's presented in the fashion that librarians are accustomed to, customers feel a sense of information overload. They sort of equate the practice of trying to select one good book from thousands of books in the library with trying to select the best brick in a brick wall. They just all begin to look alike. So there was research that lends evidence that genre fiction helps increase the circulation of fiction, and also fed to the need of the browsers, particularly of specific genre fiction. Save the reader's time. That's my 7th tip for you. And libraries who don't want to arrange their fiction by genre can certainly provide other areas of or means by saving the reader's time, having book lists available, having maybe signage in the fiction area, say near John Grisham books. If you like Grisham, try these authors, and direct customers who might not be thinking about, oh, I didn't know that there might be another author who's just like John Grisham. So utilizing your knowledge and making displays or book lists or pathfinders or signage that'll help direct the user to a spot that they might not have originally gone to. Featuring popular books, popular requests. People see us as the experts, as they say, and they love this idea of staff recommendations. You probably have seen it when you go into bookstores that our staff recommends, or Becky at the checkout desk recommends this, and then have little handwritten cards, a little blurb about a book next to that particular book for checkout. Merchandising with the power walls, I think I mentioned that earlier in that library that was up in Canada. Having special collections can often take busy um, librarians that get question after questions. Where are the computer books? Where are the home and garden books? Over and over all day long, and make them fun for the user to browse. Here at this particular library, they knew that computers and home and garden, and I think parenting and one or two other top circulating collections were their big draws. So they took them out of the nonfiction area, which you see on the perimeter behind these gondolas of books, and they brought them front and center. So you would see this just as you came walking in the front door of the library. Hey, that's exactly what I came to the library for, computer books, and here they are. Wow, how did the library ever know that? Um, promotion, excellent way to increase library circulation. If you remember the browser that I was talking about, we mentioned this earlier in the semester. Research by Publishers Weekly, I believe it was, revealed that nearly 60% of the people who visited a bookstore, such as Barnes and Noble, went to that bookstore with a particular purchase in mind. And of those 60% of those people, nearly 70% of them came out with the book that they intended to purchase, as well as several other books that they did not intend to buy. Those who purchase a book at a retail chain, such as Target or Walmart, 80% of those reported that they purchased the item on a whim. So this makes it seem that if people can be enticed to purchase something from a bookstore, or find something in a bookstore that they weren't intending to buy, that they could certainly be enticed to check it out of a library. Here you see a wonderful example of a library who's promoting their books for dummies. Now, collection promotion, when we look at this, oh, I love this quote, by the way, if you want to take a moment to read that. Collections promotion is done with specific results in mind. They want to create an impact. They want to surprise and delight the user. They want to meet an unknown need, and they want to result in word of mouth publicity. So one way that you can look to increase your success at promotion is to observe customers as they come in the library. One way I might recommend is for you to use a map, and I'll come back to that in just a second as we look more towards promotion and finding the best way to promote something. But use a map and look at people as they come into the library and start tracking where they're moving in the library, and I'll come back to that. You can promote lively, active displays around certain areas that the high traffic seems to be going. Pulling multiple copies of certain books from the regular shelves and putting them out in these high traffic areas. Identifying collections that are very popular, new books and CDs and DVDs, and putting them front and center where people know where to look. And then merchandise it. Here's an excellent example of a library that took advantage of the commemoration of the sinking of the Titanic and brought their Titanic books, creating a very visual, surprising, dynamic board, and put it on a table, put it right out in front, and the books would fly off the shelves. The library then had purchased multiple copies of these books and had them ready to replenish. This brings me to the case of Joshua Bell. You might know Joshua Bell if you're into the classical music field, but I think this case helps us think about presentation and merchandising in a good way, and looking at how presentation might affect the customer's perception of quality. Quite a few surveys have been shown that prove that people will often identify one of two identical items as being superior simply because of the way it's packaged or presented. Um, so in the case of Joshua Bell, he's a extremely world-renowned violinist. He's a young virtuoso, if you will. He decided that with the help of, I think it was the Washington Post, yeah, Washington Post, um, he decided to play. He wasn't dressed up in any sort of tuxedo or anything. He just had a baseball cap on, took his violin down to the Metro in Washington, D.C., and for 45 minutes he played music by Bach and Mozart. This is back in 2007. Uh, Over 1,000 people within that 45 minutes streamed by this world renowned violinist, most hardly even taking a notice. I think he said in his report in the Washington Post that maybe 7 people stopped, and that he collected, I think it was $32 from people who were, he had his case out and he was kind of accepting money. But if those people who knew classical music, who knew Joshua Bell, had known that this man who they saw in front of him in the Washington Metro was playing a $3 million Stradivarius and was playing music by Bach and Mozart that he would the next day play in the Boston Symphony Hall, they would have been shocked to learn that basically taking this performance that he was given in the Metro and placing it in the Boston Symphony Hall, where he was getting a $100 per ticket price, they would have been astounded. Here was this guy, by virtue of just being in a subway hall. Nobody takes notice of him. However, he's playing a $3 million Stradivarius, and the next day he's charging $100 a ticket to play the same music, the same material in a symphony hall. It goes to show that people perceive things by virtue of the environment and the way that they are presented. So why do we merchandise? And that should be clear now. To encourage people to pick up something that they didn't intend to buy when they first came into our facility. It's the same sort of psychology that's work. Here's where I was getting at with the map. Have a volunteer, or if you don't have volunteers, you yourself stand at the front of your library and for maybe an hour just plot people going in the library's front door and where they move. I show a very faint yellow line as on the map. So have a map available of your major collections and furniture. And then as you watch, just have them plot. And within no time at all, within an hour, you'll see a major yellow line or whatever color you're using. And that could be classified as your power aisle. That is the aisle that you want to focus on putting major collections or displays on, places that you would want to merchandise. Things like your Idiot's Guide or For Dummies guides, or your whatever book it is or series it is that you want to surprise people with. Again, this is just a fantastic way to increase circulation of particular books, and it makes it very, very convenient for our users, and we know that they want things to be quick and convenient. Utilizing face outs. On the picture on the left there, again, I don't have a pointer, so I can't point it out, but rather than using bookends, this library filled up the entire shelves and used face outs of certain materials to act as the bookend so that books didn't fall over. On the right, using the book end cap, as it's called, to feature material is a wonderful way to have a face out as well. When looking at using face outs of books, these are some tips that I would give you in terms of increasing the likelihood of people picking that material up. Making the design of your library and your displays intuitive. This is just a wonderful example of the display books shelves that were set up to match the curvature of the rug and even the little couch, the little worm that you see on the right of the couch. It's very visually pleasing. This is another example of the slat wall. That this was a circulation desk before it became a place to feature new books. Again, you see the entry of the library on the far left. People would come right in that building. The first thing they saw when they came in was a circulation desk. We took the circulation desk down, moved it into the library itself, and put a slat wall and our new books right there as you came in. Having customer-friendly, familiar shelving certainly helps our users with comfort and convenience. Merchandising with what are called kiosks. I mentioned face-outs. There was a study done in 2002 by the Lafayette Public Library that involved placing one copy of over 180 books. I think they were fiction, and more than almost 400 books that were nonfiction on display, face out, and then they used a duplicate copy of each of those books that they were using, and they remained in the stacks. The results show that the fiction display copies circulated nearly 100% more than their shelf copies were, and the nonfiction display copies circulated almost 25% more than their shelf copies. This is a clever display that they use at a library featuring one author, or is that Arthur? Clever. Rethinking your space. This is another example for my ninth tip. You see against the wall there, the books that are face out on the top were accessible by parents who brought kids over to the library. The ones on the top were titles that were comfortable to parents that they probably were familiar with when they were kids. Babar and Arthur, if you will, those Madeline books that they might remember. And so they were there if they wanted to introduce their own children to them. The ones that you see on the underneath the face outs that are just kind of stacked spine out are multiple copies of popular titles that would be familiar to both parent and child, since they are accessible to both. And then the ones on the bottom would be books that were accessible to the kids. End caps I've mentioned a couple of times. Now, retailers claim that end panel displays or end caps sell more items than half of one side of a range of shelves. So I believe more libraries should take advantage of this experience, this retail experience, by placing books at the ends of their shelves using the slat wall or display holders. Something like what you see here. And my 10th and final tip for you is to remember always and foremost that it is not your collection. The collection that you are selecting and purchasing material for is meant for the community. If you can keep that in mind, you will be a successful collection developer. It has been a pleasure being your instructor, your coach through this last 15 weeks. If you ever have any questions, please don't hesitate to call, and I hope you, or email. You have my phone number as well. If you have any questions about this particular presentation, let's talk about it on the discussion boards. Thanks again, everyone.